Let's learn some actual web development. This is a tutorial for beginners, but it will not be a tutorial that covers the very basics of programming or the very basics of HTML and CSS, but instead we will code a website that you can actually use, that you can use for your portfolio or that is like of actual use to your life, right? And that website will be an event page. So a page that you can use to invite your neighbors to a party that you host, or like use it for your children to invite their friends for their birthday party, something like this. A simple website, but something that you can actually use. This tutorial is beginner friendly, so no matter your prior experience, you can just follow along and you will be fine. Some of the things in this tutorial we will just use. That means I will not explain them in too much detail, but we'll just apply them as we go. And maybe I will make another video about how things work in a more in-depth level. So what we will do now is we will set up the website. We will use Visual Studio Code as the editor. We will set up the HTML and the CSS, make it pretty, and in the end we will publish the website. So you can actually use it and know like how you get your things live in the internet. We will start by creating a new folder for our new project. And for that it's a good practice to have one folder in your home folder where you keep all your software projects. So in my case, I have a projects folder in my home. My home is called HCS, stands for Hamburg Coding School. And I have my folder projects here. And in here, I keep all my software projects, like all my websites. Each project is gonna live here. So I'm gonna create a new folder and I call it event page. There we go. Now I open up VS Code. If you don't have VS Code installed yet and you need a guide on how to do it and what extensions to install, check out that other video that I made about that. So in here we will go to File, and we will go to Open Folder. And here we will open the folder that we just created. So we called it Event Page. Since I know I'm the author of everything that goes into the folder projects, I will check the checkbox, trust the authors of all the files in the parent folder projects, and say I trust. So I don't see that message again. Okay, so in here I see I'm now in the folder event page. And the first thing I'm gonna do is I will create an HTML page. And I call it index.html. Now if I type HTML, I get a couple of autocomplete options. This is a really cool feature that Visual Studio Code has. And we're gonna choose HTML5, and this will create a boilerplate, so that means it will already create some HTML structure that we are gonna use where we can now work in. So what we are gonna do before we are starting to create any HTML and CSS is we're gonna take pen and paper and sketch our website on pen and paper. It's a very rough sketch, so don't worry about being artistic or whatever. You just need to be able to draw lines and circles. That's gonna be enough. Okay, so this is just a sketch on paper, and for that we're gonna keep it very simple. All we need is a piece of paper and a pen. So don't be scared, you don't need to be artistic at all. We're gonna write a little bit and we draw some lines, and I show you how. So the first thing I want on my website is I want a headline. For me, I'm gonna create an event page for a housewarming party because I just moved and I want to invite my neighbors to come over to my house, see the house, and we're gonna have a little bit of fun. So what I want on my website is first a title. So I call it Teresa's housewarming party. So it's very simple. This is going to be the headline. It will have two parts. The first one is Teresa's. That's going to be a little smaller than housewarming party. And it will kind of be centered in the middle of the page. So the next thing I want to have on my website is a picture of my house. And that picture I want to be a circle. So I do it like this. And since we are not very artistic when it comes to drawing things, I just gonna draw some mountains and a sun. So this is basically my placeholder for any picture. And yeah, you don't need to draw anything in here. If you're lazy, you can just draw a cross like this. This is just for you to know this is the placeholder for a picture that you're going to put later in your HTML page. And of course, I want to put my address. So I say at 33 Maplewood Drive. Most websites have one section on their page where they have basically the title and an image, sometimes a little more text. And this is usually called the stage. And for me to know that this is the stage and this is the rest of the content, I just put this vertical line. The next thing I'm gonna do is write some text. So I will write, dear neighbor, something, 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 your neighbor, Teresa. What that is, I'm gonna write that later. The important thing for me now is to know, okay, I'm gonna have a bunch of text here. The next thing I want to have on my website is a schedule. So I will have a title, then some bullet points with the schedule, basically. What that is exactly, I will figure out later, but for now, I want to know, okay, in this part here, in this section, I want to have the schedule. And last but not least, in the bottom, we want to have a footer. So I just put this horizontal line, and then I'm gonna put like this, copyright 2024, my name, and then a contact address. So the small text, I'm not gonna write everything. I just put this at here so I know it's an email address. And also for that one, I just want to know, okay, this is like the copyright and I know what my name is, right? So this is a very rough sketch. It doesn't need to fit on one paper. If it exceeds one paper, you just take the next one. It doesn't need to be pretty. The important thing is that with this paper, you have a rough orientation of what you put on the website and how it will look roughly. That means you know where to put your titles, where to put your image, what your stage is going to be, and so on. So we have a website that is empty at the moment. If we bring content on our website, everything goes between body. So we have this code. We are not going into detail what all of these mean. Just see that you find the body. You have two of these. So the one has the brackets and in there is body, and the other one has the brackets with a slash and then body. The first one is called the opening tag and the second one is called the closing tag. And in here you can see that it already added some space, this indentation, like 4 spaces. And this is great because we want to start on this level. And we want to write the headline, housewarming party. And in HTML you do this by first writing the tag. This one is called h1. And in here you write housewarming party. So this h1 is saying whatever text is in here between the opening and the closing tag, this is a headline, and a headline of the first order. And the first order means it's the biggest one there is. There are other ones. For example, let's maybe continue with the h2. Hello, hello. Or an h3. Hi there. And you can see on this side that the higher the number, the smaller it gets. So we can do something like the headline of the page, a subheadline, another subheadline, and so on. What I want to do, like I specified on my sketch, I want to call it Teresa's housewarming party, and Teresa's is supposed to be smaller and on top of housewarming party. So I'm gonna delete that. That was just a test. And in here I put h3. And now it says Teresa's housewarming party. We're gonna change the styling a little later on. For now, we just bring in all the text, all the images that we want to put on the website. And in the next step, we're gonna give it the styling, the colors, the space around the elements that we wanted to. Okay, so the next thing that we want to put on our website is the image. And for the image, I want to use a picture that I took with my phone. So I'm gonna search in photos. Let's see where I have a nice picture of my house. Like this one looks good. Okay, I'm gonna pull this on the desktop. So I have it here, or like on the desktop here. And I'm gonna move my picture to the folder where my project is. So in my user folder, I have my projects folder, and in the projects folder, I have my event page folder. This is the HTML page that we are editing right now, back here in Visual Studio Code. And I'm gonna drag and drop that into my folder. And I'm gonna rename it because I don't want to type a bunch of numbers. And I call it house. So now it's called house JPEG. Okay, you can even see it here. In HTML, you include an image with the image tag. This is bringing the image on the website. If I type img for image, Visual Studio Code is giving me some autocomplete options. And I use the first one. Just press enter and it looks like this. src stands for source. I'm gonna type in house.jpg. And you can see it kind of included the picture on my website. It's way too big, but we're gonna take care of that later. As you have noticed, the image tag looks a bit different than the other ones. For the other ones, we had like an opening and a closing tag and some text in between. And because we're dealing with an image that's like way different than text, it looks different. It doesn't have an opening and a closing tag. It just has the opening tag. But instead it has some things like this, like src equals, and then in quotes, house JPEG. And this is called an attribute. So the attribute source has the value house JPEG. This is the terminology that we use. This is how we call these things. So this was our first attribute, the source attribute. This basically is giving the website the information, okay, here is going to be an image, and we will take this image that you find in this location. So the file name basically. But there's another one that is called alt. Alt is quite important because you need it as a fallback. So in here, if you write Teresa's house, you can't really see that on the website. But for some reason, if it can't find the image file that you specified here, for example, if you made a mistake in the name and you wrote, for example, houses instead of house, it can't find the file because there's no file houses here, right? So what it does instead is it displays like a little broken picture, and then it displays whatever you put in the alt tag. So next thing on our list is here. It says at 33 Maplewood Drive, so my address. I kind of like the size of Teresa's, so I'm just gonna repeat that. So I will put another H3, and I'm gonna put at 33 Maplewood Drive. Okay, cool. So now we have our first elements. Let's put the next elements there. So the next thing we have on our list is the little text, the little invitation text, where we want to invite our neighbors for the housewarming party. And with text, if you just start typing text in here, hello neighbor, it displays text on the website, right? But we don't have an HTML tag on it. This kind of works because the browser where we view the website, the browser is usually very kind to us. So it wants to do the best it can. And if there's a mistake in the HTML file, it wants to be very gracious and kind of guess what you want to put. And if you don't put any HTML tag around some text, it just thinks, okay, this is normal text. I'm gonna display it just like this. But we want to write correct HTML. So we put a P tag around it. Why P? What does the P stand for? The P stands for paragraph. And in our text, we want to have a couple of paragraphs. So here we want to have our invitation text. And then we want to put your neighbor, Teresa. Do you notice something? Like, I want to put your neighbor and then a line break and then Teresa. But on the HTML page, it didn't put the line break. So for line breaks, what you need to do in HTML is you put a break tag, and it looks like this. A break tag is also different than the other tags because it doesn't have a closing tag, similar like the image tag. And this is because it doesn't have any text in it. It's just a marker in the text that is telling the browser, okay, here at this location, please break the line. Okay, cool. So we have our little text with invitation text in here. And I'm not very creative today and I want to make my life easier, so I will use ChatGPT to write this invitation text for me. Now we just put a placeholder in here for the invitation text. and we want to put an actual text there. I don't feel very creative right now, like most of the times. So I will use ChatGPT to help me with that. ChatGPT is just one more tool that as a web developer we will probably use all the time. So I want you to get used to it, and yeah, why not use it for the website we're gonna build. So I will ask ChatGPT, write an invitation Okay, great. So I like this. The date, time, and address we will specify later, like in all the other information that comes down here. So I'm just gonna use this text and put it in here. Okay, I just noticed something that I want to show you. You can see that because we don't have a line break here, the line goes on and on and on, and you need to scroll horizontally. And this is of course personal preference, but I find it quite annoying. So what I do is I use a setting in Visual Studio Code where I put all the text in the window that I can see it, and you can activate this with Option Z. And now you can still see this is line 14, and line 14 is all this. So these are not real line breaks. The next one is here because this is line 15. But I can see all my text at once and I don't need to scroll. Great. So I also liked the other part, like this looking forward to a wonderful evening together. So I also used that. But I put it in a new paragraph, so I use another p tag. Okay, doesn't it look nice? So now, the next thing on our list is the schedule. And for the schedule, I will first put the headline, and I think H3, like the third headline, is a good size for it because I see it up there. So I'm also going to use it here. H3, and I put the schedule here. And then I want to put a list of the items of the time, like every item has a time. And HTML has tags for making lists that put the little bullet points in the beginning. And this looks like this. There's something called UL. UL stands for unordered list. And we're not gonna start putting the text in here right away, but for every list element that we want to put, we will write LI, which stands for list item. So you can see I put the LI and it already makes a bullet point here. So now I'm supposed to put in the time and whatever I want to write. And I will do that a couple of times. So I copy this. You can see here that I specified an opening tag. There's the closing tag. And inside this tag, I put another tag with opening and closing. This is what we call nesting. So you can nest elements. And this is what we did all along here in the body tag. So we had the opening body tag and the closing body tag. And we nested all our elements inside here. So we are using the same pattern if we use the UL and the LI. So we nest the LI, the list item, inside the UL, the unordered list. Okay, I'm still not very creative, so let's ask ChatGPT if he can give us a schedule what we can do in this evening. I want my think that's a bit much. So let's ask ChatGPT to make it a bit briefer. I kind of like this. I would say in the beginning, we don't put welcome drinks, but we put doors open. And I just put the time of the beginning, not the time of the end. So it's a bit more concise and brief. Food and mingling is nice. I don't want to cook for everyone though, because I don't know how many neighbors are gonna show up. So I will just say snacks and mingling. House tour is nice. And I'm gonna do that at 1900. And I'm gonna put another list item element, and in here I put the last one that we have here, dessert and farewell. I like the idea of the drinks, but I think the drinks should be in the evening. I'm not gonna put any dessert here, I think so. Drinks and farewell. Okay, nice. This is a nice schedule. Now, I want to highlight some things. I want that this time at the beginning of my list item is going to be in bold font. And I can do this by surrounding the 1700 by another element called B. So it looks like this. I put an opening and a closing tag around the time, 1700, and now it's in bold font. And I want to do that for all the items. So for the 1800, for the 1900, you can see that I use the autocomplete option of Visual Studio Code. So if I just type B and I press enter, it creates the B tag for me without me needing to type the bracket. And then I drag the closing B where I want the bold font to end. Nice, okay. I also want this for my hello neighbor. So I put this around here. Now it's bold. And I also want this for your neighbor, Teresa. So I wanted to start with your neighbor and end after Teresa. One thing you need to make sure, especially in the beginning when you start out learning HTML, is to always put the closing bracket. So make sure that you don't forget the closing bracket or that you put one too much. This is actually a source of a very common bug, that the closing tag is either missing or it's at a place where you didn't intend it to be. So make sure you very consciously put your closing tag where it belongs. All right, and the last thing that is on our page is the footer. So below here, we will first write the copyright and then our contact address. So let's start with the copyright. The copyright is not really a paragraph, right? Because we don't put any prose text, any invitation text or whatever in here. But it's a little text snippet that is just like a legal information that is going to the corner of the text. So what we do instead of a P tag is we're using the div tag. So it's spelled div. It's short for document division, and it's a very general tag that is telling the browser, here is a box of something. Not specified what, just a box. Make a box and whatever goes in there goes in there. And in our case, we want to put the copyright there. So we say C 2024 and our name. This is my name. And for the C, you know, there's this copyright character that we could use instead. And we can produce this by typing ampersand copy semicolon. And this cryptic thing is called an HTML entity. And it's basically a special character that we want to put in here. Okay, nice. This was the first thing. Now comes the next thing. We also put it into a div. And now we put our contact email address. And I will put it in here. So it would be nice to have this clickable so people can actually contact me. And you can do this with another HTML tag called A. And I want an email. So in the autocomplete options, I choose the number 4 that says A mail. And this is interesting. So we have an opening tag and a closing tag. I'm gonna move the closing tag where I want it to. So you see it's already clickable, but I didn't put anything in here. So it has an opening and a closing tag, but it also has an attribute with an href. And href is for links, and it tells me what to open if I click on the link. So I wanted to send an email to my email address. So there we go. Okay, cool. So now we have the content on the website that we want to display. Maybe let's display the house picture here. So I have all my content that I want to have on my website. The next step would be to make it fit on the website and make it pretty so that it looks somewhat like my page that I drew on the paper. Alright, now our website has all the content that we want, but we still need to bring it in a form that it looks somewhat like our sketch. And to do that, for putting the sizes, the spaces in between elements, the colors, the form of how things look, this is called the styling, and the styling is done with CSS. CSS is another language, but don't worry, today we are only touching the CSS that we want for our website. So it's not too overwhelming, you can just follow along, it will be fine. Okay, so what we're going to do is we create a new file that we call styles.css. In here we write all our CSS code. We also need to tell our website that it's supposed to use the styles that are in this folder. And we do that by writing another HTML element inside the head tag. So just below the title, we will put link. Link is also one of these HTML tags that doesn't have a closing tag, just an opening one. But instead it has two attributes that we need to put in there. The first one is rel, and in here we need to put style sheet, and the other one is href. The first one is telling us, okay, we want to link to a style sheet here, to a CSS file. And href, you've seen it before, like down here in the A tag, we've put the address here that we link to. And similarly, we do it in the link tag. we put styles.css in here. So we tell it, please reference to the file called styles.css, which is this one. And we can check if this works, for example, by specifying a background color for the whole website. And we do this by typing body, and then we need the curly brackets. If you happen to be in Germany and you work with a German keyboard, on Mac you press Option and for the opening bracket the 8, so Option 8. Option 9 would be the closing curly bracket, but it automatically put the closing bracket in here for me. Then we press Enter so that we have body and the opening bracket, then some space. It put the indentation here already for us and the closing bracket. And in here we write background color. I can use the autocomplete option, very convenient. And in here I can choose a background color that I like. So for me, I like coral, so let's go with that. And if I reload the page, it works. Our background color is now coral. Nice, huh? Okay. So the first thing that is annoying me on this website is that the picture is way too big. So I want the picture to be smaller. And I can do that by specifying img. And then I put the brackets, just like we did in body above. And you might notice body and img. This is actually the same as this body here and our img here. So what this does is this specifies the HTML tag we want to apply the style to. So in this case, for the body, so the whole website, we specified that the background color is to be coral. For my image, we want to specify that the size is smaller. We can say this by width. Autocomplete, very handy. The width is gonna be, let's say, 300 pixels. Okay, this is nice. This is a good size, I think. Now on my website, on my sketch, I wanted to have a round picture here. And I can do that by specifying border radius. This works like this. For example, if I say 20 px, px stands for pixels, it has rounded corners like this. The lower the number, so if I say 10 px, it's more pointy. The higher, if I say 100 px, it's gonna be way smoother. And for it to be a circle, I put it at exactly 50% of my width. So I say 150 px, because 150 is half of the 300 pixel I have here. This isn't resulting in a circle, but it's like an oval, because the format of the picture is landscape. If I wanted to have a circle, the picture needed to be in a square format. I can achieve this by also specifying height. And I also say 300 px. Now what this does is it stretches the image. I don't want it to be stretched. I want it to be normal, just be like a circle cut. This is one of the things I actually need to Google because I don't know it by heart. And this is very normal. So even the most experienced software developers, they don't know their things by heart. They always need to look up either the documentation of the programming language they're in, or they just Google and see whatever comes up. You can also use ChatGPT for that. That also works very well. I just Googled it and the result is object fit cover. So So now our image is a circle. Nice, right? But I have the feeling, like in my case, it doesn't really center the house in the middle. So it kind of looks strange. I would actually prefer that it keeps the oval form. So I'm gonna delete the thing that I added here and I stay with the oval. For you, you can of course choose the circle if you want, whatever looks better for your image. Okay, nice. Now the next thing that we want to do is, we had kind of sections here, right? We have up here, we have what we call the hero section. Then we have another section with the invitation and another one with the schedule. Now I want to divide my website into these sections and give them different background colors so we can have something like this. Maybe a background color up until this, and from here, white background is okay. So for that we need to edit our HTML a little bit because we need to add the sections. So what we will do here is we will create a section here, opening and closing tag, and we will put the closing tag at the end of the content of our hero section. So we want to have Theresa's housewarming party, the image, and the Maplewood Drive. So we want to have the closing tag below the Maplewood Drive. So, lesson for the future, make sure your indentation is always correct. So, we have the opening section and the closing section. And everything that is inside here should have an indentation. So we can see at one glance that this is inside the section. All right. Now we also want to do that for the other two sections, for the invitation text and for the schedule. So let's go ahead and do that. So opening and closing, the closing goes after Theresa. And I need to make sure that my indentation is correct. And also let's do that for the last one. And this goes here. And we fix our indentation. There we go. Last but not least, we also want a footer. And for that, instead of section, we type footer. Also fix the indentation. There we go. So this basically didn't change anything for the look of the website, but now we can go ahead and change the styles of each section. For example, the background color. So I first gonna delete the background color for the whole website, because we don't want the whole website to have this color. Just let's say we want to have the hero section in that color and then also the footer. So how can we do that? Let's try giving a color to the section. So if we type section and we say background color, I liked the coral. You can actually see the sections now. But we can see that, like, also the sections that we want to keep white have this coral color and our footer doesn't. So instead of telling the CSS make all sections that color, what we want to do instead is we want to specify a class, and this looks like this. So in my section tag, just before the closing pointy bracket, so at exactly this position, not after here, before here, we are gonna write an attribute that is called class. and we give it this class that we call colored. I'm gonna copy that, and I also put it on the footer because I want my first section, the hero section, to be colored, and I want the footer to be colored. So we delete that because it didn't give us the result we wanted. And instead we write dot colored, and the name of this has to be the exact name of what we put in here. This is important. So in here we put background color coral. Now we have the background color on the hero section and on the footer. Nice, right? So it still has the white border around it, but the background color is in the right place for us to start. So let's take care of this white border around here. We can remove that by saying body, and then we say margin 0. So now we got rid of the space around it. The only thing that's still bothering me is that there's a white space on top of the headline, and I'm gonna fix this by going to the headline, giving it a class, calling this class first headline, and give it a margin top, so the space on top of 0. And there we go. The space on top is fixed. The next thing we want to have, we actually want to have some space, but not like white space around it, but we want to have some space like a buffer inside so that the orange fills the whole thing, but the text is not like gluing to the side of the page. Okay, how do we do this? We do this by specifying for the section that it has a padding, let's say of 2 rem. Rem is a unit that is relative to the text size. And you can play around with the numbers here. If you put 1, it looks like this. If you put 5, it looks like this. I think 2 is actually pretty nice, so let's leave it like this. Now we have nice space around the content of the hero section and of our 2 text sections. The next thing we want to do is we also want some space in the footer. So let's go back to our HTML. We have the footer here. So in here, we can also specify some spacing for the footer. And we say padding, let's start with the same one that we have for the sections. So 2 rem. And yeah, it looks alright, but I wanted to have the same space on the side, but less space to top and bottom. So instead of padding, I say padding left and padding right. Now we see that on top and on the bottom we don't have any spacing at all. So I say padding top. Let's start with one rem. Let's see how it looks. Padding bottom as well. Yeah, it could be a little bit less, so I will put 0.8. Here also 0.8. Okay, I'm content with that. So for the footer, since we're here already, let's change something else. So right now they are like the copyright is on top of the email address, and I want them to be next to each other. And I can do that with something called Flexbox. So in here I say display flex direction row. And what this does is it will put all the child elements of the footer. If you have a look at the HTML, we have the footer here, and the nested elements, the child elements, are these two divs. One div is the copyright and the other div is the email address. So we say these two are supposed to be in one row. And I don't want the email address to be glued to the copyright, so I say justify content and then space between. And now the email address is next to the copyright, like I want it to be. Great, cool, that looks nice. Now, maybe some of your neighbors are gonna have a look at the website on their mobile phones. And for that, we also want to optimize our website for small screens. We can do that by, like, if we make this window narrow, we can see the things like how they would probably look on a mobile phone. And we can see here in the bottom that it looks kind of weird because now the copyright is here and the email address is next to it. So that's not what we want. Instead, we want it to be first the copyright and then the email address. And for that, we're gonna say flex wrap. And then it will look something like that, which is okay for the purpose of seeing the website on the mobile phone. So what else do we want to fix? Here on top, we can see if we have a really narrow viewport. That means when we see the website on a mobile phone, I would expect it to make the image smaller and not like push the content out of the site where I can't see it anymore. And I can do this by specifying a couple of things at the image tag. One of these is, I say max width is 100%. And the other is height is auto. And now it will keep the aspect ratio, so the ratio of height and width will be the same all the time, but the image will be maximum 100% of the width. That means it will not be larger than the width of the screen is, so it won't reach out of the edge of the screen. The next thing I want to do is I want to remove the space between housewarming party and Teresa's. And I can do that by saying h1 margin top 0. This is 1. And Teresa's, we know this is the first headline. So here we say margin bottom. Let's see how it looks when you put it to 0. Yeah, it looks good. I like how it looks. One other thing is, in my nice sketch, I have everything centered. So on my website, I also want things to be centered. And for the top part, I'm gonna do it like this. In the section, I will add another class, and I do that by, like here, I say colored, and to add another class, before the closing double quote, I press space, and then I name the next class. So I call this hero because it's the hero section. So then here I can say dot hero. Dot means we're looking for the class. And then I say text align center. And voila, we got everything centered. And it looks nice on both large screens and smaller screens. The next part, the sections, are not as easy. Why? Because we want a very specific thing. So on larger screens, you see that now everything is to the side. But in our sketch, we have kind of an alignment on the left side, but we still want it to be more centered. So that's like roughly the same size as above. And for that, let's do a little trick. So in our HTML file, we have 3 sections, right? One section is the hero, and the other sections are our content. And we have used divs before, so we will use another div here. And it ends after the last section, just before the footer. And of course, we always need to make sure that our indentation is right. So now it looks like this. We have a div, and inside this div, we have our section with the Hello Neighbor text, and we have our other section with the schedule. And this div, we can give a class, and we call it class content. So in here, we can say class content, not colored, content has a max width of 400 pixels. So now we got the width right. And the next thing we need to do is all that content that now has a limited width, we will move to the center. Now our content has a width of 400 pixels. And then we also say margin auto. And margin auto is a neat trick to center something. So if you have an element in an element, a box in a box, or a nested element with margin auto, this is a trick in CSS to center something. As soon as it has margin auto, it will center it, because margin auto means the margin on the left and on the right should be the same. So it just centers it. And I think 400 pixels is like not narrow enough. So I want that to be, let's say 300. Yeah, it looks good. So we see we have a little problem here, because on smaller screens, the text is overflowing. So what we can do here, instead of width, we say max width. So here it will still keep the property for large screens that it has a width of 300 pixels and is centered, but for small screens it can go less than 300 pixels, which is what we want. One other thing I see here is that there's a lot of space between Teresa and schedule, and I want it to be less space. So let's have a look at the HTML. This is my schedule, and this is my section. And I know that the section, because we specified that here, it has a padding of 2 rem. So there's space. And the H3 also has some space. So we can do a couple of things. We can say that on this section, we put a class and call it less space. Less space. And we say margin top is 0. Not the margin, the padding. Only the padding top is 0. And I also want to have less space on the schedule element. So I can also put the class here, less space. But it doesn't change because that one doesn't have padding, it has margin. So what we add here is margin top 0. And now it looks nice. I noticed that something very important is missing, and that is the date of the housewarming party. So let's add that. So we go to our HTML, and in the text, so in the text we can say housewarming party will be on November 11 at 33 Maplewood Drive. And then I wanted to stand out, and I do that by adding a B tag to make it bold. So we said housewarming twice, so I'm gonna remove that. So the party will be on November 11 at 33 Maplewood Drive. Nice, right? And then I want to make the schedule a little bit more interesting. So I'm gonna add emojis. So doors open, I'm gonna put the door emoji, snacks and mingling, I'm gonna put the pretzel, house tour, I'm gonna put the house, and drinks and farewell, I'm gonna put the champagne glasses. The reason I wanted to put these emojis is to show you that you can put emojis on websites and they will be displayed. So no problem there. I personally think it kind of adds something charming, something nice to the website. You do as you like for your website, but I, being a millennial, I love to put emojis everywhere. One last thing I want to change is the font. So right now, this is the font that comes out of the box if you don't specify anything. And it looks kind of standard. I think it's Times New Roman. And I wanted to look a bit more designy, so I'm gonna change it. And a good practice, like even if you're not a designer and you want your website to look a bit designy, a good practice is to choose 2 different fonts. One font for your headlines, that's a bit more bold, a bit more maybe elaborate, and a simple one for the rest of the text. So let's see that we find a nice pair of fonts. So for that, I go to font pair CO, and on there I can go to pairings. And here what they show me is basically examples of how people paired headlines and normal text. And you can browse through it and see what you like. For me, I kind of like this one. And we see that these fonts are called Playfair Display. This is the font for the headlines. And this font is called Lato. The nice thing here is that the fonts that are displayed here on FontPair are Google fonts. That means it's quite easy to put them into your website in the CSS. Let's go to Google Fonts. And let's search for the first one, Playfair Display. Playfair Display. It's this one. Click on Get Font, Get Embed Code, and here I have some instructions how I can include them on my website. So embed code in the head of your HTML. So I'm gonna copy this. I can click Copy Code. Then I go to my HTML page and I go into the head. So this is the head element, and just before the head element closes, I'm gonna paste. Make sure that you always indent your code correctly. Now we have included the styles for this font. Let's get back to the website, because that was only step 1. The next step is, this is what you need to put into CSS. Only what is inside here, I'm gonna copy. And in my styles, I'm gonna say everything that is a headline will have this font. And to select everything that is a headline, I need to do something like this. H1, comma, H2, comma, H3, all the way to H6. And in here I'm gonna paste. Also indent your CSS code correctly. So the last two I'm just gonna remove because we keep it as it is. And now in all our headlines that we have our nice new font. That's nice. So let's also apply our other font. The other font was called Lato. So let's go into Google Fonts. And let's search for Lato. Let's click Get Font. Get Embed Code. And here, the only thing we need to copy here is the last one, because the previous two we already have here. So we included them. And now in the styles CSS, we go way up where we have our body. And in here, we copy paste this line, font family, and put that here. And now we have the font family Lato. And I think it's still a bit heavy, so I want to make it less. So what I can do is I can copy this, paste it here. And basically it's about this font weight. So this font weight is giving weight to the font. So It goes from 100 to 900 in 100 steps. So if I put 500, it's gonna be like this. 400 doesn't make a difference because the font doesn't have something like this. So I think 300 looks nice. It's a nice contrast towards the headlines. Alright, now that we are done with designing the website, we want to publish it. So this is the fun part. We do that by using a service that is called tiny.host, and that is spelled Tiiny, so tiny with 2 I. And it's pretty simple. It's free. You can upload your files here. And what they mean by files is the files that we created here. So our HTML, our image, and our style CSS. And because we have 3 files and not only one, we need to make a zip file that includes all the 3 of them. And we do that by going to the folder where our website is. This is this folder in my case. And we click on compress. And it builds a zip file. Now we can take this, go to the website, drop the file here. We need to specify a name for our website. I'm gonna call it 33 Maplewood Drive. And as an email, I'm gonna use this hide my email feature from Apple. I'm gonna use this. For me, it doesn't really matter what the email is. And boom. We've sent you a verification email. Please check your inbox or spam folder. So let's go into our mail. And here we have the email of tiny.host. And we click on verify. What are you using Tiny for? Personal website or project. And there we are. Boom, our website is live. Yeah. So, view site. Let's see how it looks. Teresa's housewarming party. Isn't it nice? Great. That's really cool. I'm very happy. Nice. I'm pretty happy with the result. I hope you are too. If not, or if you run into any problems, feel free to leave comments below. I'm actually looking for recommendations on topics for next videos. So if you run into any problems, I'm happy to help you with that and make more videos about how to fix them. So make sure to comment. If you're interested in more videos about this, more content, or maybe even live events that we host at Hamburg Coding School, make sure to subscribe to my mailing list. The link is below in the description. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one. Bye!